How doing, everybody? Welcome back to the Shaun Attwood channel. I'm Ron Swanson, and we are live with Timothy Alberino, and we're going to be diving into his work as not only an explorer and an author, but looking into some of the mythology of the world that kind of bridges some of the things we know with the past. And Tim, thank you so much for being here. Please give us a little introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into this.
It's my pleasure to be with you. It's always difficult to give an introduction. To try and explain to people what it is that I do. I'm an author, I'm a researcher, investigative researcher, and explorer. And I've been working in those capacities for about 12 years now. My interests are wide-ranging, from biblical topics to UFOs and aliens and giants and alternative history and everything in between.
Yeah, that's like, you kind of just got me pulled in there for a second there, Tim. And I imagine, right? I mean, I just want to jump into straight asking you questions, if I'm going to be honest, Tim, right? Because if you've been exploring and you've seen things that, I would imagine people don't tend to see often, right? And we've seen these depictions of UFOs and carvings, and we've seen odd things that have popped up in the mainstream. Before we get into our main topics, what would you say stands out to you as being your memorable moments from throughout your exploring over these 12 years?
In regard to the UFO topic?
Well, in regard to things that have really made you question what you've known, or have put, or bridged two things together. There must have been a couple of moments for you that have just made you go, oh my God.
I discovered a lost city along with my colleague, Anselm P. Rambla, back in 2018, Peru. Which we're not sure if it's a lost Inca city or if it's a city that was built by the Chachapoya people.
That's pretty.
So that's always, making discoveries like that is always exciting. But I would say that probably the most impactful thing I've ever done in regard to solidifying my worldview was my investigation into giants on the island of Sardinia, which I've been to Sardinia, I think 3 times. And I've done extensive investigations there, including interviewing firsthand witnesses, people who dug up the bones of giants with their own hands. And many people I interviewed, many of whom are no longer alive because they were elderly when I interviewed them. And just the stories that they told me were unbelievable. And have stuck with me all these years, and that's really what has served to establish in my own mind more than anything else, the absolute reality of giants. That giants once walked the earth, and I think still do to some extent. We're talking about humanoid people who are between 9 and 15 feet tall. So. A giant in the true sense, not the NBA sense.
That's incredible.
So I would say that, that probably was the most impactful, just to hear testimony after testimony. And we're definitely dealing with humanoid giants, not with dinosaurs and giant sloths and mammoths and so forth, not with megafauna, because in most of these cases, the giants were accompanied by artifacts and were wearing jewelry, necklaces, rings around their fingers, and so forth. So we're definitely dealing with humanoid giants.
That's incredible. I'm a big believer in the giants, so I'm a very easy sale on all of this, Tim. And again, it kind of blows your mind. Finding a lost city, finding witnesses to living giants with and artifacts and bones. For a lot of people, they just get spoon-fed what we're told, and we get it's so much of falsehoods fed to us about our own histories, right? Why do you think there is this huge cover-up, Timothy, and this huge denial from the powers that be about this existence? Is it just about it's easier to control all knowledge than to let some of the reality slip into
Are we talking specifically about the existence of giants?
Yeah, let's go specifically about the existence of giants.
Well, I've tried to answer this question. This is the question I get asked the most in regard to this topic. And the answer is difficult because on the face of it, it doesn't seem logical that the existence of giants would be covered up. People have suggested that they cover the existence of giants up because it would confirm or affirm the biblical narrative. That's true to some extent, but it affirms the testimony of ancient people, generally speaking. It affirms the testimony of certainly the cultures that were living in the ancient Near East, all of whom had legends of giants. Right? I mean, everyone's familiar with Gilgamesh and the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Sumerian legend. But everyone had legends of giants, the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, all of them. So it confirms the ubiquitous testimony of history in regard to giants, not just specifically the Hebrew account. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The other idea is that it would create a problem for the theory of evolution by natural selection. I'm not sure that that's true. I think that you could easily create. I'm not a Darwinist. I don't subscribe to evolution by natural selection, but an evolutionist could easily create a branch from Gigantopithecus, right, from the gigantic ape, and say that these giants must have evolved from Gigantopithecus or something like that. It wouldn't be difficult to shoehorn the giants into the evolutionary tree. So that's not very compelling to me either. The only thing that I can surmise at this point is that the occult is involved, that the giants are used in occultic practices, their remains. This has to do with Canaanite necromancy and the summoning of the spirits of dead giants, which according to legend, not just according to Hebrew legend, but also according to, broadly speaking, Canaanite and ancient Near Eastern legends, that the spirits of dead giants can be summoned, perhaps even harnessed. And this is why you see the gigantic tombs, megalithic tombs associated with giants. Oftentimes, people are familiar with dolmens, but also tombs which have chambers inside of them, and there's no bodies in them, because the purpose of the tomb was for a rite of passage, a rite of incubation, to summon the spirits of the dead heroes, the mighty men of yore, giants in most cases, and commune with them, and perhaps even be possessed by them. And the benefits of that, if you're a warrior society, being possessed by the spirit of a giant, would be very advantageous.
Absolutely.
And that's just a reality. I mean, Canaanites have summoning rituals to summon the Nephilim, rather more specifically to summon the Rephaim, which were giants, which were a particular giant clan in the land of Canaan. And you can find these summoning texts among the Ugaritic texts, where they're summoning various Rephaim by name. And so I think that we're looking at an occult conspiracy, and I kind of hate to say that because it seems so over the top, but really it's the only thing that makes sense to me, because the other two explanations don't hold water. There's something deep and dark here. This topic is, it appears to be seemingly the most classified topic, at least personally, that I've run into. I mean, as I always say on these interviews, I've met a lot of people in the government or whistleblowers who are willing to talk about aliens and, behind scenes, off the record, willing to talk about aliens and UFOs and reverse engineering programs and all of that, crash recovery stuff. But they're always not the ones that I've broached this topic with, the topic of giants. They're always reticent. They're always nervous to talk about giants, or won't, or simply will not. Especially the Kandahar giant incident. That one really seems to trigger a lot of red flags with people. And I've had that story confirmed to me by several sources, one of them quite high level. And the Kandahar giant is a contemporary giant. Well, we're talking about the year 2005.
Say that name again. The Kandahar giant. Did
The
you say?
Kandahar giant. Yeah, the Kandahar giant. It's been around for a long time. Sort of an internet legend at this point. The story was originally broke by my colleague at the time named Steve Quayle, who's a author primarily occupied with the subject of giants, and he was contacted by an elderly woman who wanted him to talk to her son, who was active duty. He was an active duty pilot, cargo pilot. He flew primarily C-130s, and ultimately Steve was able to get in contact with this man, and I was able to interview him. Steve and I were able to interview him for a documentary film.
Wow.
Back in I think it was 2016 or 2015 when we interviewed him.
Okay.
And so he told us a firsthand account of flying into, and he showed us, by the way, all of his credentials. He was
I've
definitely
somehow managed to not hear anything. I mean, I'm sure the side chat knows because the internet is buzzing with this. It was
The
apparently
story's been around for a long time, and I'll tell you what. Every time I talk about this, people asking me about it all the time now. Every time I talk about it, the bots come out in force. I mean, the need to debunk this story is remarkable.
Major. Yeah. It would be major.
And for whatever reason, I mean, I can talk about whatever. I can talk about crash retrieval stuff, gray aliens, alien abduction, all kinds of stuff all day long. But as soon as I bring up the Kandahar giant, the reaction is vitriolic. And people say, there's no proof. This story's been debunked. It's not just one story, by the way. It's not the Kandahar giant. There's one particular incident that I talk about, the one that pilot told us. But it's the Kandahar giants. There's a clan of giants living in the cave systems in Afghanistan, and I would bet my house on it. Okay, because I've talked to operators, and I've talked to SF operators, but also high-level individuals in the Air Force, for example, who were commanders, who had personal encounters with these things, and others. So the story,
wow,
the story has not been debunked, and the individual that I interviewed it's not secondhand, it's not rumor. He literally flew the body out of Bagram, picked it up, flew it out of Bagram, delivered it to Qatar. It was, by the way, it was 10 to 12 feet tall, 1,100 pounds. Red here, just like that image there. Red here. That image up. It was delivered when he arrived on the tarmac. When he landed, he arrived in a C-130 to pick up a high value asset, and he was met on the tarmac by what he thinks were military intelligence, rather either Army or Air Force intelligence. And he called them the babysitters because they stayed with the body, and it was delivered on a pallet. And the load master had to wait before it went on to the C-130, and it weighed 1,100 pounds. The guy, when you subtracted the weight of the pallet, the guy weighed 1,100 pounds, and they estimated his size at 10 to 12 feet tall. I mean, the pallet's about 9. I think those Air Force pallets are 9 by, I want to say 14 feet. And he was in the fetal position. He was hanging off the pallet. 6 fingers, 6 toes, red hair.
6 fingers, 6 toes.
6 fingers, 6 toes, red hair, and pale skin. Again, you're going to notice in the comments of your video, you're going to notice an inordinate amount of vitriolic commentary regarding this incident. It's like it's just automatically generated whenever the Kandahar giant incident is brought up for whatever reason. It's very, very highly classified.
It's interesting because the two big things I can remember over the last couple of years where there's been giant footage on TikTok or on social media, there has been very public removals and denials of the footage that's been put out in a way that doesn't happen with UFOs or, the lights in the sea or anything like that. So now that you mention that, there does seem to be a much tighter lid on the lore of the giant than anything else in the and I dare to say these words, right? But forgive my uneducated phrases, but the paranormal, the cryptid, the unexplained world, right? It seems they do keep a lid on this. And when you mentioned the occult, do you think perhaps we go to the occult because we know that there's evidence of the occult existing and all of this, but do you think maybe it's a thing? Have you ever seen any evidence of things to point towards dimensional reasons or shifting between realities, or a reason like that the cover-up could be? Because
I don't really know anything about that. All I can tell you is that we're dealing with flesh and blood giants, and in these instances where the bodies are discovered, right? But there's also a spiritual, or if you like, supernatural element to this, in which, as I said before, the spirits of the giants seem to persist in the world and can be summoned, can be invoked in these rituals. Certainly, as I said, the Canaanites believed this, the Hebrews believed it, and generally speaking, in the ancient Near East, this was a tradition concerning dead giants, and the root of this idea is found in the Book of Enoch. Because in the Book of Enoch, when God judges the Watchers, these angelic beings who descended to the earth and copulated with human women and progenerated a race of giants in the earth, when God decided to judge the Watchers and their offspring, part of the judgment of the giants was that when they died, that their spirits would persist in the world as vagabond wraiths, as disembodied wraiths, and that they would experience all of the desires of the flesh. They would be hungry, they would be thirsty, assumedly they would have sexual desire, but without bodies through which to satiate, to satisfy these desires. And so they seek to inhabit bodies. And so these are these are disembodied conscious beings who are in a state, an unnatural state, by the way, this is a curse, who are in a state of torment. And you'll recall that this is actually the premise of the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Remember Barbossa and his crew? They had the Mayan gold curse, where all Barbossa wanted to do was to be able to bite that apple and to be able to enjoy the pleasures of corporeal reality, but he couldn't because during a full moon it was revealed that they were wraiths, and they couldn't eat or drink, and they couldn't enjoy anything, and that's precisely the curse of the spirits of the Nephilim, of the dead giants, according to the Book of Enoch. And generally speaking, so it's certainly the Enochic tradition, but generally speaking, the traditions of the Levant, at the very least, the traditions of the Levant, of the Canaanites and the other clans, many of whom were giant clans that were inhabiting the land of Canaan certainly during before and during, and then to some extent after the conquest of Canaan by Joshua and the Hebrews.
Yeah, it's an incredible topic, Tim. I'm not going to lie. I'm quite new to the flesh and blood reality, and the realness of stories like yours. That have some real weight behind them. Can I just one more question on giants? What's your take on Admiral Byrd's story and the ice wall, the center of the earth, and the narrative of larger creatures dwelling under our feet?
So obviously Operation High Jump was real. They went down there, and according to Admiral Byrd's own testimony, they encountered flying saucers, a craft that could go pole to pole, in the blink of an eye. And there was some sort of a kinetic encounter with something. I think that their main purpose was to go down there and dislodge a Nazi base. I think there was a Nazi submarine base down there, or at least that's what was believed, that the Nazis had constructed a base under the ice, because they went down there with Admiral Byrd had some military assets with him, some naval assets. So it wasn't just an exploration expedition; it was a military expedition. And in fact, I don't recall the exact details, but I believe they lost a couple of those assets in some kind of a sortie with an adversary, and that adversary had flying saucers. So, or at least there were flying saucers involved. or monitoring the situation.
Mhm.
Nobody really knows. Now, that all of that is historical fact. What we don't know is whether or not Admiral Byrd's diaries are real. And in
Mhm.
Admiral Byrd's diaries, there's this very colorful story of Admiral Byrd flying over this particular area in Antarctica where he sees that the ice retreats, and it's this very lush, verdant area, and he
Mhm.
sees mammoths walking around down there and other kinds of megafauna. And it's this very elaborate story where they land and
It
they go
is.
down into the inner earth and they encounter different entities and so forth. It reads like fiction because I personally think it is fiction.
You think it is? Okay.
I'm not convinced that the Admiral Byrd diaries are real. I mean, it doesn't read like a military man writing an account of what he encountered. It reads like fiction. So I'm doubtful that the Admiral
Okay.
Byrd diaries are real, although obviously the Operation High Jump was very real. And the fact that they encountered flying saucers, it's a matter of history.
Mhm. Well, let's. I tell you what, Tim. I could sit and talk to you about giants all night. I'll be honest with you. I would love to specifically get you back to just really drill into more on giants. They're very, very at the center of my heart with a lot of things that I do, and it would be great to know more. But look, flying saucers, aliens, reptilians, hybrids, humanoids. Where should we begin? Okay, because it's a topic that people can argue that we're talking about aliens, off-worlders. People argue about interdimensional beings. We talk about ancient races that walk among us. Where do you sit? What have you seen throughout your work, whether it's exploration or stories, whether it's paintings or archives that reference this reptilian grasp that seems to have its mittens round our planet, if you ask in the opinions of many?
Well, let me talk about what I think is likely to be true
Sure.
in all of this, because there's obviously, as you well know, there's the subject of ufology is vast, and there's a lot of lore in there, some of which is substantiated, but most of which is not. So let's frame this in what I believe to be true or likely to be true. I think is the best way to phrase it.
Sure.
I think that I think that we are interacting with at the very least, with four different races, four different species of beings, if you will.
Okay.
And the first three, I have a high degree of confidence. The fourth, not so much. But let's enumerate them. So the first one is, of course, the gray alien. I would say that my degree of confidence with the gray alien is my perspective is it's a stone cold fact. Gray aliens exist. They're real. They're biological beings. They crash. They die. And the gray aliens are members of a particular faction. They're not in charge, so to speak. The gray aliens appear to be the small ones, because there's also tall grays, which is kind of a different thing. But the small grays, typical gray alien that's about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, they appear to be managed by another species, which Dr. David Jacobs denominates the insectilians, sometimes called mantids. I personally think that the insectilians manufacture the grays, that they genetically engineer them.
Yeah, that's the story that I've landed on, is that the grays are soulless drones created as a worker force.
Yeah, I don't know if they're soulless, but I think they may be some kind of cybernetic drone. I'm just assuming a cybernetic component. There may not be one, but they certainly, at the very least, seem to be clones.
Yeah.
And they're being genetically engineered by the insectilians. And so that's one faction, grays and insectilians. The insectilians are the managers of the abduction program. And that's primarily the activity of the grays on planet Earth, is the abduction program.
It's interesting that you mentioned the combination is like machine and flesh, right, with the cybernetic side of it, because the mantis are often referred to as those that like to play around with DNA and machinery and technology and kind of bring it together, right? So it's interesting that you're landing on the same notes that other individuals that I've talked with have.
Well, I derive this perspective directly from the abduction material. And when I cite abduction material, I'm talking about primarily Bud Hopkins, Carla Turner, and David Jacobs, along with some others such as Barbara Bartholick and to some extent John Mack. But primarily Hopkins, Turner, and Jacobs. And I think that their work in some regards is unimpeachable. And they all sort of drew the same conclusion. I say sort of because they let's put it this way: they all defined the same phenomenon, and the phenomenon, of course, is alien abduction. And it's apparent in their work that the insectolins are the managers of the program. Okay. And aside from that, I myself know many abductees. Abductees come to me all the time. And abduction is ongoing, by the way. There's a persistent myth on social media that abductions have stopped or that have shifted from physical to non-physical or some nonsense. Not true. Abductions are still happening. We're talking about the physical abduction experience. Alien abduction is a physical experience in every way. I mean, you're physically removed from your environment. It's not astral projection. It's not a supernatural experience. It's not, like tripping on DMT. You are physically removed from your whatever environment you happen to be in. Even if it's in the midst, you could be at a party, and Greys can abduct you. They switch everybody off at the party, and they take you. And when I say switch everybody off, everybody sort of goes into a state of what would be the right way to explain this? Maybe something like a comatose.
Yeah.
And then when the abductee is returned, everyone is just switched back on. The Greys do this all the time, and there's no reason to believe that the program has ended. So the experience is physical. You are physically transported onto a physical craft, and then you're subjected to physical procedures on board that craft, and those procedures relate to the production of human alien hybrids. Again, under the management of the insectolins. The insectolins are managing the program. And again, this comes from the abduction material. And a lot of people are very skeptical about this information because they think I'm pulling it out of thin air. No. There's voluminous data that lends itself to scientific inquiry. And that is, again, to some extent, I would describe it as unimpeachable. I mean, the phenomenon is well documented. The details of the contours of this phenomenon are well documented. That doesn't mean that everything is known about it, but at the very least, we know that abductions are hereditary, and that one of the manifest objectives is to produce human alien hybrids. So, by the way, in their most advanced stage, indistinguishable from us. So there's a covert operation happening here. The program is clandestine. Okay, so that's one group, right? Greys. I said there's four groups because I'm echoing Eric Davis's comment to Dr. Eric Davis when asked by Congressman Eric Burleson at a meeting in Capitol Hill, what were the various aliens? What were the factions? Davis said there's four. And I agree with him, except there's four different things that I'm enumerating here, but there's actually three factions. So the Greys and the insectolins are one faction, and then you have, of course, the Nordics or the Pleiadians, who are the taller, very comely looking beings. They look like us pretty much, except for their. Most people describe them as being more handsome than human beings, and they usually have blonde or golden blonde hair and fair skin and clear eyes and so forth. And then finally, you have this group that you referenced earlier called the Reptilians or the Reptoids, and that's the group that seems to be there's the least amount of data I mean, it all is, it's very nebulous as it pertains to these things. And whether or not they exist, I don't know. I suspect that they do, but there's nothing. Again, there's very little data that you could cite. Like when I say data, I was referencing the abduction material. That's data, whether people like it or not. It is data. The abduction stories are consistent, and they're consistent across cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and the testimonies when collected there and when abductees are interviewed by competent abduction researchers, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know of any alive today. David Jacobs is still alive, but he's retired. You always get the same story from them. So when it's done competently, because you have to be able to circumvent the screen memories, which surface first when you talk to an abductee. As I said, the program is clandestine. They're not supposed to remember the abduction experience, so they have false memories planted in their minds, sort of as a firewall.
And those are called screen memories, you said, right?
Screen memories, that's right. So, but the reptilians, everything I've heard about reptilians is all very fanciful. Now, there are a couple of instances in which reptilians show up in the abduction material. I can think of one instance in particular with Ted Rice, who's still alive. Ted was the subject in Carla Turner's book, Masquerade of Angels.
Okay.
And Ted had a without going into Ted's story, he had some very visceral encounters with reptilians. But again, I mean, it sounds crazy, right? It sounds like I'm too confident about this, right? Well, when you take the abduction material and then you compound it with all of what we know about the crash retrieval program, now all the whistleblowers, things that are being said publicly, things that I've been told privately, we've recovered the bodies of grays.
Mm-hmm.
And other things, not just gray aliens, other things, but certainly gray aliens in some of these craft. And I have no reason to doubt people who give congressional testimony, but also things that I've been told behind the scenes. So I think that's a very broad view. That's a very broad view of the 35,000 foot perspective. Is we're at least dealing with a handful of different entities here. Now, the nature of these entities, the provenance of these entities, that could be debated. Although I would say this, NASA, I think it was what was it, 2 years ago? I can't remember the details. I'm very foggy on these details, but
okay.
NASA basically admitted to the world that they had discovered evidence of microbial life on the planet Mars. I don't know if you recall that.
I do recall that.
It didn't really make many waves. It was published in the media and then it disappeared. And it wasn't, if I recall, it wasn't so direct. It wasn't NASA making a definitive statement, declaring we found life on Mars. Rather, it was, we think we might have found evidence
of ancient microbial life, sort of thing.
Ancient microbial life on Mars. Microbial life on Mars. So
there's just to back up what Tim's talking about right there. You guys can pause it and watch this back if you want.
Right. And so the reason why I bring that up is, well, I think it's much more definitive actually than that. I think they have discovered and not just ancient microbial life. I think they found
that was from 6 days ago. So what you're talking about is definitely, I remember hearing about this too, but for some reason that's from less than a week ago. But you get that feeling, right, that they test the water. I feel like it's like they're testing the water with public reaction to the possibility of, okay, good. Right. Carry on.
And so the idea here is that they, by announcing that they maybe they found microbial life on Mars, they're prepping the public for the announcement that yes, there was microbial life on Mars, which is the precursor for the next announcement.
Mm-hmm.
There was intelligent life on Mars, right? Or animal life, and then intelligent life. So here we have an extraterrestrial context, framework being constructed in the background. Because if you have microbes on Mars, that's extraterrestrial life. Now, it's not sentient life.
No,
but
it's
but it's extraterrestrial life.
Yep.
And if you have microbes, you may have all kinds of things. You may have had Mars probably had an ocean at one time that dissipated, right? Because it lost its atmosphere. So what kind of creatures might have been in the sea on Mars, right? So you are now firmly in an extraterrestrial context, are you not?
Yep, I agree.
So I find it bizarre today, and this is a trend of let's say what's the new generations, Gen X and Gen Z or whatever.
Tim, I have no idea, bro. Like,
it's the newcomers to ufology in the last decade, really in the last 5 years. There's droves of people who've entered the scene, who've become interested in the topic of UFOs, UAP. I can't stand that terminology, but that designation. But there's droves of new people who've come on board, so to speak, and they don't have the background. They don't have the foundation of all of the good ufology that has been the foundational material that has been laid over decades by highly competent researchers. People like Stanton Friedman, and Hynek and Stringfield and others who've done great work, and of course all of the aforementioned abduction researchers and dozens of others who, before this topic was popular, risked their own careers and reputations to research ufology, to track down sightings and stories and abductions and looking for physical evidence and talking about crash retrievals. See, that's a body of knowledge, and it's foundational, because what the whistleblowers have been testifying in Congress is an affirmation of what these ufologists have been saying for decades. And so the problem now is that you have, as I said, droves of new people entering ufology, and they're gravitating towards these particular ideas in regard to the phenomenon, the ideas that are trendy, that are getting the most play on social media, those ideas being that aliens are interdimensional beings.
Okay.
Aliens are time travelers.
Okay.
Aliens are crypto-terrestrial, right? Everything except
what is crypto-terrestrial?
So crypto-terrestrial would be, the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis posits that there could be beings that are indigenous to the earth that have been inhabiting the earth, surreptitiously with us for hundreds and thousands of years. Okay. So let's say, for example, if we discover that gray aliens are in fact an aquatic species that are indigenous to planet Earth and have been inhabiting the deep seas, right? But they've been hiding, basically. They're therefore crypto-terrestrial. They've been here all along, but they've been their existence has been clandestine. Their activities have been clandestine, but nevertheless they've been here all along. That's crypto-terrestrial. Okay. That's not the only possibility. There are others. For example, you could have an advanced antediluvian civilization. Let's, for the sake of argument, say that there was an Atlantean civilization that was quite advanced before the Great Cataclysm. The flood destroyed their civilization, but there were survivors. Okay. And those survivors went underground or to some inaccessible place on Earth, Antarctica or something, because of, by way of their advanced technology. And that they've been, again, surreptitiously inhabiting the Earth alongside of us all of these years, but we just have not interacted with them. That would be a crypto-terrestrial civilization, right? But they wouldn't be extraterrestrial. They'd be crypto-terrestrial. And I'm totally open to that. I think that's a fascinating perspective. Totally open to that. And there's probably some truth to that in regard to something out there. However, I'm fascinated by this desire is not the right word. by this impulse to reject out of hand the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which was favored by a lot of the old school ufologists. It was the favored view, decades ago. And there were outliers. There were people who, like, for example, the great Jacques Vallée proposed an interdimensional hypothesis, and John Keel, a long time ago. So that's been around for a long time, but it wasn't really that. It wasn't really that popular at the time. The extraterrestrial hypothesis was the most popular hypothesis early on in ufology, and now people are, for whatever reason, there's this, as I said, there's this impulse to disregard, to jettison the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and I can't figure out why. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is because soon, and mark my words, soon, and soon could be 5 years from now, NASA is going to definitively publish a paper or make an announcement that, yes, there were microbes on Mars. So extraterrestrial life is going to become concretized. It's not going to be speculative anymore. I mean, it's not, life coming from Zeta Reticuli. It's coming from Mars, which is obviously much closer, but nevertheless, it's extraterrestrial. So, and also the other thing that we understand about these beings is that they are in possession of advanced aerospace technology, and they have the capability to not only move through the atmosphere of the Earth in ways that are inexplicable. The transmedium is the term that's often used, transmedium travel. In other words, they can move through the atmosphere with the same ease as they move through the ocean, and they can seemingly move through solid matter in some instances, or at least in some reports. But they move through the air and through the water with the same ease. And it's not because they're moving through the medium. It's because they're moving the medium around the craft. And they're in, what Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis describe as an atmospheric bubble, in a gravitational bubble.
Okay.
And so the point here is that these craft, not only can they move through our oceans and through our atmosphere in this way, they can move through outer space with the same ease, and have been seen in outer space by our astronauts on record. Our astronauts have seen UFOs in outer space. Okay, so if you've got UFOs in outer space, how big of a leap is it to then assume that these beings have a presence on Mars? Right? In my mind, it's not a very large leap.
It would make sense.
It would be elementary. It would be elementary for these advanced beings to have a base on Mars. And so if they have a base on Mars, which I believe they do have bases on Mars and on our moon, by the way, then the extraterrestrial hypothesis is very much still in play, because they're here. Obviously, they're here. And I do believe that they're at the bottom of our oceans. I think they have mobile bases and they have underground bases, and they're inside of our mountains, by the way, the various factions, and they're operating in our atmosphere. And some of them, no doubt, have been here for a very long time. But that doesn't mean that their origin is the Earth. I mean, they could have been here. You could have, for example, the Nordics. Maybe they've been here for 10,000 years. But if they didn't originally come from here, then they're not They're not terrestrial. They're extraterrestrial, right? Even if they've been here for 10,000 years, the provenance is somewhere else. So all I'm saying is, people have this impulse to discard the extraterrestrial hypothesis in favor of these things we don't understand. We don't understand time travel. Do we understand time travel? No, we don't understand time travel. We can't do it. We don't understand it. It's all speculative. Okay, time travel is just an idea. It's a fictional idea right now. We don't understand interdimensional travel or interdimensional beings. We've never done it. We've never seen it. We don't have any proof of it, right? And yet it's just such a favored view in ufology, yet there's no proof of it. Zero, none, right? That such a thing even exists, although I am a proponent of the hyperspatial theory of the universe, in which posits that there are more than the than the three spatial dimensions and the one of time that we currently interact with. But that's kind of a different conversation. But these are very, very popular views today, and yet NASA, in a very covert manner, I would say, has already told us that there's life on Mars, right? So I think that having said all of that, I think, again, taking this 35,000-foot view, I think that there are several factions interacting with us on planet Earth. Some of them have been here for a very long time. At least one of them, I think, has only been here for about 100 years, namely the Greys. And I don't think they came from here, at least the Greys. I think that there are bases on Mars, and at the very least. And this is absolutely an extraterrestrial phenomenon in that it involves other planets, not just the Earth. So that's my summary. And I don't, you didn't necessarily ask me for one, but I'm gonna shut up there for a while.
No, you're good, Tim. You're good. It's when you're talking about the favoring of the interdimensional things and people not getting to grasp with the fact that we're talking about physical beings on physical planets and you're traveling through space in real ships or however it is they travel, right? Do you think by adding that extra layer of unknown to something that to a lot of people is already unknown, the extraterrestrial life factor, it's almost preparing us, or it's going to prepare us to be underwhelmed by the announcement of extraterrestrial life, because it's back to the traditional sense of it. It's physical beings on a physical planet.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's right. I don't know. I think most people will just say NASA's lying, and we'll just disregard such an announcement and say, no, they're covering up for the fact that these are actually interdimensional beings or something. I don't know. Nobody trusts institutions anymore. So it's not really going to matter what NASA says.
For me, I often wonder what the funding pitch is going to be after the PSYOP. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if we know that there's solid balls of matter floating through space that have got living organisms on it, and they can put a spin on that takes our attention off of that, and it's always this distraction and mirrors thing with these people and me, Tim. And it's always the story that's burning behind it.
Well, as I always say, nobody can control the phenomenon.
Right.
Only the narrative surrounding the phenomenon, because the aliens don't talk to us. Right? Okay. They don't talk to us. So, not directly. So the government has that advantage. There's no messaging coming from these beings that's apparent, that's conspicuous. So the government can control the narrative, but they cannot control the phenomenon. And
do you think that's only because of the understanding that you have of how these individuals would communicate? Do you think that there's a possibility that there's parameters out with this that known science can't explain, so that are being discounted in your arguments?
In regard to communication?
Yeah, let's just take the communication for a start, right? Because
I think that the communication, I think we can say definitively that communication is telepathic.
Yeah, of course. I would 100% go down that road with that argument.
But in regard to whether or not these beings are broadcasting some kind of a message to the Earth, I would say they're not. Not one that's conspicuous. Not one that's conspicuous.
I'm with you. I misunderstood what you were getting at there. So yes, you're saying they're communicating, but they're not just sitting with a speaker pointing it towards or blasting their message.
I would say that if there is any kind of communication, it's covert.
Yeah.
Are some of these factions interacting with elements of the United States military? I would say yes.
Mm-hmm. I would say so.
But that action is not. It's not for the public good. I mean, we're clearly interacting with something non-human. Now, having said that, I would agree to some extent with people like Dr. Stephen Greer, who think that much of what we see in our airspace today is our ARVs, our alien reproduction vehicles, in other words, hybridized craft that we produce. Sure, yeah. I've got no problem with that. I think at this point, we've had some success. I think the success has been much more limited than people like Dr. Greer think, but I think we've had some limited success in reverse engineering these components, aspects of these craft. And we have our own saucer, I would say, that to the untrained eye, displays the same sort of incredible aerial feats as the alien craft, but in reality is probably still quite technologically inferior to the alien craft.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Even though it's much superior to anything that we have in our conventional arsenal. So, in other words, we have craft that look like they're 500 years more advanced than the jets that we're deploying right now over Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tricky when we say we, right? Because people assume I'm talking about the United States government, when in fact it could be Richard Dolan coined a term years ago, breakaway civilization. We could be looking at something like a group, a controlling faction within that is to some extent above, that supersedes the United States government, a breakaway civilization, so to speak, in possession of the technology, and that it's not really accessible, at least some of it is not really accessible to the United States military. Although some of this most of this technology has the technology that we've been able to reverse engineer and from which we've derived ARVs, our own reproduction craft. Some of that technology has been funded by American taxpayers. But of course, you have dark money, you have black projects that are funded by black budgets. In other words, some of the funding comes from the American taxpayer, and some of the money does not. It comes from nefarious, let's put it in these terms, from nefarious enterprises. And the Congress, I think Congress is slowly beginning to realize this, that there are aspects of this. Aspects of the crash retrieval program, the legacy program, that are directly connected to the United States government and funded by the United States government. And then there are aspects of it that are completely out of control, out of the jurisdiction of the United States government. And not only does Congress not have oversight, they can't get it because elements of this, of these projects are being funded outside of the budget, the federal budget.
Tim, it's interesting because the way that you're presenting this is it's removing all of the modern hype behind what all this could be. Okay, removing the sort of Hollywood. It has to be something more fascinating than it already is, right? It can't just be a flesh and blood creature in a ship from another planet, right? It has to be interdimensional, time traveling. For some reason, the subtleties of the lost knowledge of this world are often blown up in Hollywood so that we miss how subtle they are in the world that we live in. And it almost feels like when you've broken this down, they're trying to do that now with other life, non-human life forms. They're trying to make it so blown out of how already incredible it is. It's like, hey, don't worry about how amazing this already is. Worry about all the unbelievable stuff we're going to stack on top of it. So it's almost like you're focused on how they're getting here rather than the fact that they're here, right? It's a weird game that they play. Now, I don't know what your take is on, and I'm sure you've heard about shamans, magic, and the elements throughout your travels. That is kind of the center of my whole world, is the subtleties of magic that get lost throughout the modern world. How everything's represented in the movies as fireballs and lightning and all this kind of stuff, where you can have a conversation with the world, and if you just listen close enough, it'll answer. That's kind of my mind. And I feel like they're applying the same over-the-top misdirection to this topic as they have to that. And again, I'm not asking necessarily to agree with my beliefs, but it's very interesting how you've broken this down and how my particular life on the spectrum analyzes things. And I can see now that there has been this weird new introduction of hype. It could all be around CERN. There's a lot of weird stuff around CERN that is a conversation for another time. But how do you feel about that as a possibility? I don't know if misdirection is the right word. It's almost like trying to take us off how these creatures exist here, how they got here, rather than the fact that they're here. Does that make sense? Sorry, I've tangented myself a little bit there, Tim.
Yeah, I think that some of this is misdirection.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just take the testimony of the whistleblowers and then again add in what I would say that we've known in ufology for decades, the reality of the crash retrieval program, as David Grush famously said, non-human biologics, which isn't the greatest term, by the way. In other words, we've got corporeal bodies and physical craft that I think it's very possible that all this other stuff is being promoted to what would be the right way to describe this?
Because a big metal ship that looks like a car that we could rivet together is exciting enough in 2026, Tim. Like, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
If we can put a drone in the sky, right? If we can buy a little drone from a shop and put it in the sky and control it ourselves, I think humans and technology and how we view how amazing something is kind of go hand in hand. And if we can understand what we're seeing, I think it takes some of their ability to control us away, possibly.
I think that some of these trendy ideas are being used to obfuscate the tangible realities of the phenomenon.
Okay, I'm going to have to Google obfuscate. Hang on a second. You're going to have to hang on.
It's the tangible realities of the phenomenon that let's say that the secret keepers, the secrecy group in government wants to keep wants the public not to focus on. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the crash retrievals in the bodies. Because once you start focusing on crash retrievals in bodies, that means that you can start to
make stuff.
You can look for yes, that's right. You can look for the programs. You can look for the craft. You can inquire about
start making patents, Timothy. Patents.
But it's money, right? If you start talking about, that's right. If you start talking about interdimensional beings and time travelers and this,
there's nothing to patent there. There's nothing.
It all becomes very intangible and metaphysical, and it kind of gets everybody arguing about, having these ontological arguments and creating this sort of chaos inside of ufology, instead of everybody drilling down on crash retrievals in alien bodies. And people say, well, this is a famous meme, now that's out there. I used to believe in aliens until the government told me they were real.
Right.
Well, that's very cute, but the problem is the government is actually telling you they're not real. The whistleblowers are telling you they're real. The government is telling you they're not real. The government is Arrow. The all domain. What's the acronym for Arrow stand for? I can't remember. The all domain anomalous research organization office, something like that. But Arrow that's the group that they're the government. They represent the government narrative, the sanctioned narrative out of the Pentagon, not the whistleblowers. Everybody makes this weird. And again, I think that this has been done purposely to the public. People there's been seeds sown into public discourse in ufology to distrust the whistleblowers. And to depict them as the government narrative. This is the government lying to me. I used to believe in aliens until David Grush told me they were real. Well, David Grush isn't the government. He's a whistleblower. He's defected to some extent from the narrative, the sanctioned narrative. And if you want to listen to what the government is saying about UFOs, UAP, then go read the reports published by Arrow. Arrow is the government, and what they're saying is, in no uncertain terms, there's nothing to see here. This is largely debunked. We can't explain all of the aerial phenomenon, but most of it has prosaic explanations. and we haven't found any evidence of extraterrestrial life. We haven't found any evidence of non-human intelligence. There's your government, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to say to people who present me with that meme, I used to believe in aliens until the government told me they were real. And then I say, no, here's the government telling you they're not real. What now?
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to use that meme and say, oh, okay, so now I know that the government is telling me that aliens are not real, therefore I'm going to believe in them? I mean, it's all very stupid, to be honest with you. So there are a lot of chirping birds right now in ufology, and everybody's talking about time travel, and everybody's talking about interdimensionality, and everybody's talking about all these other ideas, when all we should really be concerned about right now is, where are these projects? Where are the bodies in the craft that have been recovered?
Yeah.
And how is it that all of so much of taxpayer money has been dumped into these things and there is zero oversight? You've taken our money and then you've lied to our faces. There's zero oversight. So that's the conversation that the secrecy group does not want us to have. And that's what the congressmen and women who are working on this problem, that's what really is grinding their gears, is that they have run up against a program that it seems to be explicitly, intentionally designed to circumvent them as congressmen and women, right? To circumvent oversight, congressional oversight, and therefore the oversight of the American people. And so the problem is, and there are some obviously legitimate reasons for some of this. We want to maintain a technological advantage over our adversaries, certainly. But the basic realities of this phenomenon need to be told to the public, that we have recovered craft that is non-human in origin, and we have recovered bodies that are non-human, right? That basic reality needs to be, at this point in time, it just needs to be told to the American people and to the people of the world. And that's what a lot of these congressmen and women and whistleblowers are fighting for right now.
Tim, could we not argue, right, that in the grand scheme of space, these factions and what seems to be a battle to keep it all secret on Earth, I mean, when we talk about crash ships, I often ask myself, is it not out of the rule of question that if these creatures, these other races, if they had the ability to travel through, say, I don't know, let's just use like a Stargate for an example, some sort of portal thing, go through one end to the other, that could be repackaged and misconstrued as interdimensional? Because I believe,
precisely,
I mean, I've got to kind of argue that if I was an insectoid, right, and I took a bunch of my enemies, or if I was a Nord and I wanted to expose the Greys, I would just catch a bunch of them, stick them in a metal tin, and throw them against Earth, and hope the Earthlings find it, so that they're presented aliens in a way they can understand, right? Oh, it's a ship. Well, I know what a ship is. We've got boats and cars, right? My little brain can understand this. Because if they just open up a freaking portal and walk through it, I think at some point our brains would have just been, what are we seeing? You know? So do you think there's an argument where we could see the misrepresentation of technology as interdimension or time travel, and just because of how it kind of looks a bit cool, it looks a bit cool, right? But could we not also argue that these crashes could be deliberately by opposing factions from within these races trying to expose the other race and not themselves to us in a way that we can understand? And I'm sorry again, my tism's wild today.
Or maybe they're dogfights.
And yeah, could be dogfights. Yeah, could be.
In some cases, one faction shoots down another faction's
could
craft.
Be.
That's possible. Or we're working with one faction against another. That's another possibility. But you make a good point. So if I see which I've seen UFOs, but if this is something that many people have seen, if you see a craft, let's say a saucer is hovering in the sky, right?
Yep.
And then in the blink of an eye, that saucer's gone. It just shoots off into the distance, right? At an incredible rate of speed, almost instantaneous travel. Instantaneous acceleration is the way that Lou Elizondo describes it. Well, it's not difficult then to extrapolate that whatever technology that these beings have, traversing the cosmos isn't going to be difficult for
Right.
them. Okay,
Right.
let's make it. Let's shut off the rest of deep space and let's just look at our solar system.
Sure.
Would it be very difficult for beings in possession of that kind of technology to get to the moon? No, we just went to the moon again in the Artemis program. Well, these things could get to the moon in a matter of minutes, maybe seconds. Obviously, you know, based on their capabilities that we've been able to observe. Well, then, is it that much of a leap to think that they could also get to Mars with ease, or Venus?
No,
or the other planets are supposed to? No, I mean, I think we can extrapolate that. Okay, if they can do these things, if they're displaying these kinds of aerial maneuvers in our atmosphere, then they're probably doing them in outer space. So
yeah, it's the basic math.
What's the need? Here's my question. What is the need? Why do we need another theory? That's my question. Why do we need an interdimensional theory or a time-traveling theory? That's what I wonder. And I'm not necessarily opposed. Interdimensional doesn't really mean anything, but the time travel thing, okay, that's interesting. I don't think either of those are well. Certainly the time travel. I don't think that we're dealing with time travelers here for several reasons. But what's the need? Why do we have it? What's the reason why people feel like we have to come up with another explanation? Like, what if we just said, hey, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is that either A, they've been here forever, whoever they are, or B, they came from Mars or somewhere in our solar system at the very least. Do we really need another theory? Why do people require another theory? To me, it seems like, I'm going to use the word again, obfuscation of plain realities, that these theories are being promoted in order to keep everybody confused and befuddled and arguing about ontological ideas.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, right? I've never actually considered the argument of let's make all of this within our own solar system and look at it from just within our own realm. I don't know why. It seems like a very obvious, you know,
it's just a hypothesis. I mean,
well, it's an interesting way to sort of frame a discussion, to be perfectly honest, because it's amazing how uninhabitable we're told everywhere but Earth is, right? It's almost like, hey, there's no point going there. Okay, I believe one of them is just like it rains lava and stuff. It's very doesn't sound like we ever want to go there. Doesn't even sound to him like we want to invest any money in going there.
But it doesn't even matter, because if these beings are inhabiting the deep oceans right now, if they got a mobile base on the bottom of the ocean, which I think they do, and if they're under the ground, what problem are they going to encounter building a base on the surface or in the interior of Mars? They're not going to encounter a problem. Why couldn't they create their own atmosphere and use their technology to be able to? We could build a base on Mars if we could get there. So bases on Mars is a piece of cake for these guys. Bases in the interior of these planets is a piece of cake for these guys, based on the technology that they apparently have. So my whole point here is riffing off something you said earlier. I do feel like there's an intentional, there's somebody is purposely injecting chaos into the UFO community and promoting certain ideas to obfuscate the plain realities. That's my personal observation.
It's almost like the more we've dialed in, the broader they've made the scope. If I'm being honest with you, it's like the more people have gotten closer to sort of understanding what's going on, they throw in a whole bunch of other stuff to just muddy they really do. You've nailed it. And to be honest with you, Tim, right, I genuinely could sit here for the next 4 hours listening to you, you know, putting this all, telling us how to frame this in a little bit of a less unbelievable way, right? Because when we dial it back to living, breathing, sentient beings traveling as we do, it kind of puts it in perspective just how much has been put out there to kind of mislead and guide us. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about talking through telepathy and things like this, depending on the person, will depend on how they observe how that interaction has happened with them, right? So we will get misconstrued. It's a spiritual thing. It's an interdimensional thing. people will strip it down to the bare science and be like, oh, I understand, it's telepathy. But do you think that humans, there's so many of us, right, that we're never all going to see the one thing in the same way, and we're never all going to land on the same page, regardless if the science is screaming it in our face, the testimonies, all of it? Are we past resolution as a race? Do you really think?
Well, obviously, everybody brings their own their religious and cultural ideas to the topic. So everybody, I once used the Tupperware analogy that we all walk around with Tupperware in our arms, and as we go through the world, we have these, each of our Tupperware containers is labeled, conveniently labeled. It's everything's categorized. And there's a taxonomy that we're familiar with and comfortable with. And so as we move through the world, we just sort of file away everything that we encounter into one of these Tupperwares, and then we can feel like we've made sense of the world. And so everyone does this, and the problem is that we're not allowing. If we do that, then we're not allowing the phenomenon to be what it is. We're trying to force it to be what we want it to be what we think it should be. And if you come from I call them consciousness bros. If you come from the consciousness bro background, and the ayahuasca and the DMT and all that, and the meditation and the transcendental stuff, if that's your background, if that's your world, then when you approach this topic, you want to make it all about, consciousness and the, vibrations and different dimensional stuff. That's your background. That's your container. If you're coming from a Christian worldview, as many of my colleagues do, then you want to make this all about angels and demons, and primarily demons. And this has to all, because that's what your Tupperware, that's the only way you can categorize it. You got to stick it in that demons Tupperware that you're carrying around with you. And that's the way you approach it. I mean, if you're coming from a purely scientific background, let's say agnostic or atheistic background, then you're going to be more intrigued with the time travel aspects, the potential time travel aspects of this, or the crypto-terrestrial or extraterrestrial hypothesis, or whatever. Everybody's coming to this, approaching this, because the phenomenon doesn't tell us anything about itself. That's the problem. Okay, if it did, we wouldn't be arguing about it, right? If the phenomenon had made itself apparent and conspicuous in its intentions and its designs and its nature and its origin, there wouldn't be all of the, and if the government had been honest with us about this, there wouldn't be all of these different ideas floating around. We'd be settling on just a couple at this point. Yeah. But as I said earlier, the phenomenon does not communicate with us, not directly and not universally, not corporately at least. And that doesn't mean that there aren't, as I said earlier, that there aren't factions that are working with our government or other governments of the world. That's very possible. I don't know that that's true, but it's possible at least. So the way I approach this phenomenon, I happen to be a Christian, as many people know, but I don't try to approach this phenomenon and cram it into a biblical term like demon. I don't come to it with this demon box and then try and take the phenomenon and stuff it in there. Yeah. And then pat myself on the back with the satisfaction that I've solved the mystery. No, I just let it be what it is. I try and understand the contours of this thing and try and distill down what can we say with a deal of what can we say with a degree of confidence about this phenomenon? What can we say? And then based on those things, begin to extrapolate and hypothesize various ideas. And because I don't believe that any of this threatens my worldview. I don't believe any of this threatens the biblical worldview. And a lot of Christians feel like it does. But I don't, because I have a very expansive biblical paradigm. And unfortunately, many Christians do not. They have a very rigid, inflexible paradigm that doesn't allow for the existence of extraterrestrial beings.
I'm with you. Yep.
But mine does, again, and if there are microbes on Mars, then there is an extraterrestrial reality framework context
100%.
Automatically, right? And to which we have to acquiesce. And it's just another component of reality, just like robots and artificial intelligence components of reality that we now deal with, that we now encounter and interact with in our everyday life, that 20 years ago would have seen science fiction. But today it's not. The same is going to be for this idea of extraterrestrial life in 10 years from now. It's just going to be another component. We have robots, we have artificial intelligence, we have extraterrestrial life.
I agree. I agree. 100%.
People are just going to have to deal with it.
People are very much going to have to deal with it. Tim, I'm really sorry to say we're running out of time today, and I just want to say I would love to have you back, Tim, because I feel like there is like, you know what? I don't know if you host your own podcast or anything like this, but when you become gripped by your own guest, okay, and you feel like you're watching a podcast rather than hosting it, there's a lot more to say. And the way that you kind of, because trust me, right? I know I'm part of the vibration crew, okay? Like I'm one of, like, and the reason for this, Tim, right, is I have zero interest in blind faith. I wasn't religious. I don't believe in anything off of blind faith at all. I'm very religious now because I had a very profound religious experience. But I'm very much like, I'm definitely not a trust me bro. I can't buy into that. So everything that I've experienced on my kind of journey, okay, has been me witnessing or experiencing firsthand. And that's what I kind of lock in with and kind of go, well, I know that I can prove to myself, and I'm not about here to prove to anyone. It's just about my own personal journey. And you strike me as an interesting person because you're stripping it all back to what it was in the beginning, right? It was dudes in spaceships coming from one planet to another planet.
Potentially. Yeah.
And again,
I'm open to other ideas.
Oh,
certainly.
I'm with you.
But I feel like that's Occam's razor.
Right.
Let's say it's much more likely that the Greys are from Mars or Zeta Reticuli than time travelers.
Well, here's the thing.
Because we know Zeta Reticuli exists. We know Mars exists. Yeah. We can observe the technology that they have and extrapolate that they can, or infer rather, that they can travel to these different planets. And we can do all of that based on things that we know. We know absolutely zero about time travel.
I'm with you. Oh no, I'm not arguing that. But it's interesting.
That's why I favor an extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Well, yeah,
we also know absolutely zero about interdimensionality or interdimensions.
I'm with you.
Or
okay, I'm with you there too. I'm with you there too. Okay. But it seems to me that our ability to reach the places we've been told these things are, as that increases, the bullshit to misdirect us has increased. So
yes, that's true.
It's very fascinating that, oh, hey, listen, there's probably nothing ever going on Mars. Just so happens we're going there, right? So, you know, if there's people there for us to meet, we want to keep that under wraps. It's really interesting. And my analogies are kind of dumb sometimes, but it's fascinating because it's already fascinating. A dude in a spaceship from another planet, that's already mind-blowing, Tim. So they're adding on these extra layers. And I think by adding on this extra layers, it makes it unbelievable again.
It makes it intangible.
Thank you, intangible. I'm inventing dumb words here, Tim.
It makes it metaphysical.
Yeah.
And therefore, it takes the focus off of the legacy program and of the bodies and of the technology and of all of the functional aspects of the phenomenon.
Yep.
And that's what they don't want us to be focused on.
That's exactly it. And do you know what? It's a great place to put a pin in it, Tim. But quickly tell everyone what you've got coming up with your books. All your links are in the description. Tim, you will definitely be back. Sarah will be sending you an email tonight. Sarah's watching, my producer, so thank you. Because there's a lot more to be told. Do you know what? I could just do 2 hours on the Giants, bro, and forget all about the aliens. I'm telling you.
There's a larger conversation we had about giants for sure.
Hell, it really is, Tim. It really, really is. And I'll be honest, giants are very much any of the earth-loving creatures. They are very much at the center of my heart. I very much believe the giants are part of this planet as much as we are. You know, you're talking to somebody who hasn't ever seen one, but I can show you footage of what looks a damn sight like a little fairy flying past my head. There's a lot of stuff, okay? But I think a lot of people write off the the creatures that we share this ball with, not the ones that have visited here, but the ones that grew up here. And I believe that giants are one of them, and I can't wait to hear more. So tell us a little bit about where everyone can find your stuff, Tim. And
well, I have I'm on social media. My handle is always the same, Timothy Alberino, at Timothy Alberino. I have a YouTube channel, and I have a members community. And for people who are interested in further exploring my perspectives and joining a community of people who are just absolutely amazing, and it's a troll-free troll-free environment. I have my own social media platform, and I publish a ton of exclusive content for that community. If you're interested in that, you can find it at the alberinoanalysis.com, the alberinoanalysis.com. And I have a book, Birthright, out, and Book of Enoch, going to be publishing here shortly. A follow-up to Enoch, the Book of Giants, Jubilees, and the Genesis Apocryphon in a single volume. That's going to be coming out in about a month, so people can just track with me. My website's timothyalberino.com, but my community is the best way to track with me. I'm going on. I've got a upcoming expedition, UFO related expedition I'm going on here shortly, and my community members track with me on these expeditions and stuff too. So
that's awesome.
But hey, thanks a lot for having me on. It was a lot
Tim,
of fun.
This is the start of a bunch of conversations, because it's just you're such a, like, you can talk to, when we talk to people that have theories, when we talk to people who have read books or written books, we're talking about a guy who you discovered a lost city, bro. Okay. Like, there's a certain amount of knowledge that comes from
with my colleague Anselm P. Rambla.
Yeah, okay, big shout out to the colleague too, right? But when it comes to holding ancientness in your hands, when it comes to speaking to people who've been entrapped in culture, I'm making up words again, Tim, in cultures that have been lost or forgotten, it's the forgotten knowledge, Tim. And when we talk about isolated and lost tribes and all of this kind of stuff, that is where it's, in my humble opinion, going to have those elements of that lost knowledge, whether it's how they freaking built the pyramids, where the giants come from, what fairies are, whatever. It's fascinating. And as far as I'm concerned, you are an incredible source for all of this, Tim. So thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ron. It was my pleasure.
Well, look, thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching at home. Please like and share. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, follow myself and Tim, and of course, the Shaun Attwood channel. We'll see you next time. And my second show tonight is off. I've got something I need to run out the door right now and do. I'll be back tomorrow. I've got 3 shows tomorrow, so I'll see you then. Thank you all. And from me, Ron Swanson, as always, be safe.